Okay, so I'm going to talk about deserts, megalakes, and ancient humans in Africa. So this is a screenshot from the Global Paleoclimate Database. It's where scientists like myself data dump what we know about past climates, about natural cycles, and about the response and the resilience of the environment to those climate changes. So you can see we get an A+ for North America and Northern Europe. There's lots of data and a pretty good consensus about what we understand about past climates. I work down, I don't know where the point of it is. I work down here in central southern Africa. There's much less data and no one can agree on what's gone on in the past at all. One of the things we do know very well about Africa is that there are times in the past when it's been much drier and times in the past when it's been much wetter. One of the reasons we think that is because we find these stories of crocodiles and hippos written on the rocks of deserts that are now extremely dry. And together with a raft of other evidence, it's one of the reasons we think that places like the Sahara may have once looked a little bit less like this and a little bit more like this. So why is that? How does that happen? When I was an undergraduate, this is the story I was told. So this is the explanation for it. There's a wobble in the Earth's orbit. We call it precession. And it amplifies or dampens a seasonal cycle in each hemisphere. And that in turn controls the behaviour of the African rainbelt. So 9,000 years ago, when we were drawing pictures of hippos on rocks in the Sahara, the summer temperatures in North Africa were a little bit warmer. And that increased heating of the land surface enhanced the North African monsoon, allowed it to push a bit further into the Sahara Desert. And so the sort of average position of the African rainbelt moved a bit further north. By extension, in that theory then, the average position of the African rainbelt has moved away from the southern subtropics. So what we should see is southern Africa getting drier when North Africa gets wetter, and vice versa. So this is what we call the asymmetry hypothesis. We should see asymmetry between the hemispheres. I became interested in this because I spend a lot of my time pottering around in a big dry lake basin in southern Africa. So this is the Kalahari. It's this big sandy basin in the centre of southern Africa. In it you'll find lots of elephants. You'll also find the Okavango Delta, which is fed from rain that falls up there in the Angolan highlands. At the end of the delta, you'll find these big dry sub-basins of what we think was once an extremely large paleo-lake. And that lake, at its greatest extent, was probably about 90,000 square kilometres, and that's bigger than the largest body of fresh water on Earth today. So not an insignificant lake in its time. And what we've done is to go to the shorelines of that lake and drill them and take samples which we can then date, and that tells us when those sediments were laid down, and so when that lake was there. We do that using a technique called optically stimulated luminescence, and you can find our laboratory at the bottom of the stairs in case you haven't seen us. We've also got a bright, shiny new sign. In this context, it's a pretty blunt tool, but it did tell us two important things. It told us, one, that that lake has come and gone many times, and two, that the last time that that lake was there was about 9,000 years ago, which slightly invalidates or is evidence against this asymmetry hypothesis. It's the same time that we're seeing this North African humid period. And we puzzled over this for quite a long time. And it's really only since we've been collaborating with some very clever climate modelers, particularly based in Reading, we've been able to try and unpick what's going on. And when you feed those climate models with that orbital precession cycle, what we find is we can reproduce those North African humid periods very nicely. What happens in southern Africa is a little bit more complicated. And for reasons that 7 minutes don't allow me to explain, the sort of oceanic configuration of the southern African landmass means that we get a much more heterogeneous pattern, a much more heterogeneous response. Which is interesting, and it's good. It means we can we can all stop arguing over who's right and who's wrong. It also explains why this big lake basin that I'm looking at, Palaeo-lake Makadikadi, which is fed by the West African tropics, appears to be full at the same time that we get these wet periods in North Africa. So who cares about any of this? Well, archaeologists care. They're particularly interested in how the geography of those changing hydrological and ecological processes are impacting the way that humans used the landscape in the past. And whatever the humans were using the landscape for in Makadikadi, they seem to need some very large hand axes to do it. And perhaps we should all care a bit more, because these long records are really quite important in helping us to unpick how sensitive the landscape and the vegetation of Africa are to changes in rainfall. And so we're now moving from sand grains actually to leaf waxes to really try and refine the relationship between those two, between rainfall, vegetation and landscape change. And so I think with the appropriate sunset, that's it for me and Megalakes. I just want to say, actually I didn't put it up here, but none of this work that we've been doing is done in isolation, so I've got many colleagues and collaborators out there, so thanks very much for